Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwukta.
This is Merp's first official Boomsday Lightforge. We've been in the meta for a while. Hopefully, you guys have been winning, getting those 12s. This Lightforge will be a lot shorter than last time, hopefully. And we
No,
want to just
going
focus
8 hours
on
again.
initial reactions and kind of, let's look back on some of the things that we talked about last week and see where we are now.
Yeah, so this is 4 nights into the new meta. Although we're recording this on Friday night, if you're wondering. That's why this is going to go up like on Saturday. We already have a 12-win Hunter up on our YouTube. We're getting that's a co-op me and Merps, and we're getting Merps' 12-win Rogue up on Monday on the YouTube in lieu of, usually it's Lightforge and Coop, but Lightforge and Coop are going to go up on Saturday. So we're kind of swapping our normal schedule, and we'll hopefully be able to put up another 12 on Wednesday and meet our normal schedule. So it's kind of a light meta, as we expect in the beginning of a new expansion. And it's been, like, we'll go over all the cards later. Not like all of them, but like the big ones. The things that surprised us, anything we may have gotten right, wrong, all that stuff from what we've seen so far. But let's just start with the overall meta. We're in 12.0. Things are, like, not moving. I think that's the best way I can describe it. Like, games are long.
What do you mean by not moving? Okay.
Games are so long. I think they're longer than they have ever been. I remember your 12-win run. Like, I was supposed to come in for the second run, and I, like, had dinner, watched you for a bit,
be fair,
took a 2-hour nap.
I played even slower than I typically play, like much slower than I typically play, just because so I was roping a lot more than I roped, by the end of Witchwood. First of all, because it would be a complicated board, and then I would have to think, is this okay to drop Blight Nozzle on? Right?
Oh, because that's right. You were working through
Blight Nozzle. I was working with double Blight Nozzles. I was working with Corpse Razors and Mechanical Whelps as well. And for that, you need to like really risk assess what the board state is going to be like, and their opportunity to really turn Blight Nozzle into just like a very average card, right? Or like a subpar card.
I mean, we'll talk about Blight Nozzle specifically pretty soon. But so in general, I've noticed that people are taking longer with their turns, and you're getting to later turns than normal. The boards are becoming more complicated than they were. Probably because there's not as much initiative. Certainly a lot less board clears. So you end up, and then this expansion has a lot of like random 1/1s or like Giggly Inventors and like stuff like that dropping.
Right.
So
Giggly Inventor by itself will delay the game by 2 to 3 turns.
Yeah, and create really complicated boards. So it's not just you're doing one extra turn. It's for like 2 turns, but you figure out what to do with the Giggly Inventor for each time it gets played. And, it may get played by both of you, very likely. You have 2 turns of a complicated board that both sides has to think a lot harder about.
Right.
I found myself like roping more, and I found myself like getting roped, like actually not being able to figure everything out before the rope happened. And that's very surprising. I like in a normal course of the game, in previous expansions, I've never like had a case where there were multiple instances in like run after run where I'm like, I just can't like think fast enough for this. I'm just going to do something. Like even in the beginning of expansion. So I think on the board between 12.0 and Giggly Inventor, this is the most complicated, like technical board trading type expansion that we have ever seen.
I agree. There was a lot of thought necessary in my rogue run, and I've just been, I haven't had the time to sit down and play full runs, but I'll watch other streamers, right, play their runs. And these past 4 days, I've watched snippets of Ratsma Stream Arena and Hafu Stream Arena, and it's very true. Boards are very complicated. And stuff like Giggly Inventor and sort of like old standbys like Spreading Plague have created boards that I thought were not possible months ago. Just 5 minions on one side, 6 minions on the other side, and it just doesn't get resolved that quickly, right? Like there's a lot of stall, there's a lot of, and it's because you don't have like the third Defile coming down, the second Flame Strike coming down, and it's just like, well, okay, enough of this. I'm just clearing all of this. So you definitely do see that, and I think it's led to some people, and I've seen a bit of chatter, on the Arena HS subreddit. Some people are not so happy. They're like, "Oh, this is boring," but this is,
This
I
is
know,
what
especially for you,
skill is
this is
about.
exciting,
Like,
right?
no, like, yeah, sure, it's
Complicated board
boring.
states.
I mean, most things requiring more skill is boringer. The most exciting things are generally random, right? Or they're like huge swings. So it's not just that the board is getting complicated because we have all these like taunts and whatever. There's actually fewer taunts right now, I think, than there were in the previous meta, like before 12.0. I think before 12.0 happened, there was actually more taunts in the meta. Now, because Boomsday didn't really add that many taunts. Yes, there's Giggling Inventor. Yes, there's Omega Defender. And oh my god, that seems like two ridiculously great taunts, and they are. But that's it, right? They have another one that's that like 6 mana, 5/6 taunt, right? Which is like mediocre. And then not a lot of class cards got taunt.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
overall, it's actually been faster in terms of if you actually wanted to get through and hit the opponent's face than it used to be, which is why you see aggro working really well right now in the meta for once, in a way that it hasn't worked in the prior meta as well, and that's because there's really not that many taunts. But when there are those taunts, they are very annoying. And even if it's not taunts, even if it's we were talking before the stream before the Lightforge about microtech controller. Like even if it's something like innocuous, like microtech controller, which is the 3 mana 2/1 that generates 2/1/1s, that takes a while to clear if they're just gonna go face with it, right? Like if you put a replicating menace on the board, that's 4 bodies for 4 mana. Like and they're hidden under a death rattle. Like these all take time to resolve. Um, and you're getting the time to resolve, as Merv said, because there's not those board clears anymore. Because 12.0 has removed swing from the arena. Not like totally gone, but it's literally cut down swing by like almost 50%, I think, single handedly. Between I'm confident that between the lower rate of MC Tech being in the arena, the Boomsday cards themselves not really being that swingy. Like when you see Omega, you think, "Oh my god, what a huge swing!" When's the last time, if you've been playing like actively these few days, that you saw an Omega Defender come out on your opponent's side and been like, "Oh no!" Like I've seen a lot of Omega Defenders played on turn 10 and afterwards. Not a single time was like, "Well, that was it," unless it was like, "Well, that was it. He has 6, health of taunt, and that could be like 0 attack, and I'd be screwed." Um, that like those swings don't really exist in Boomsday, and the 12.0 filtered out a lot of the swings that existed before Boomsday. So you have this total net effect where you're just kind of on the board. You got to be honest. You have to execute your strategy. You got to adapt a bit depending on how the board goes. You always get a turn to react to whatever the heck your opponent's doing. And if everybody keeps getting one more turn to react, that creates very complicated board states and that creates a lot of delays. So that's where we're at right now, right? So is it the most exciting meta when it comes to, I don't know, just people who want things to happen? No. Just things are like not happening. This is the anti things happening meta right now. But is it more skillful? It's way more skillful. We have taken like 5 steps towards chess away from like coin flipping.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I had a lot of fun during my rogue run, just sort of evaluating, risk assessment, right? And it's sort of like if you don't appreciate risk assessment, then you probably just don't enjoy this mode that much, because arena is all about risk assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Constructed, there's obviously some risk assessment there, but like we talked about before, a lot of the skill that in constructed goes into your like the actual meta, right? When we talk about arena meta, like it's what people play, the speed of it. But in constructed, it's you have to know the meta, right? You're trying to meta like the other people, which is something you can't really do in the arena as much. So, right, like it just creates so much of an emphasis now post 12.0 on risk assessment. Will your minions survive? Will they get past your taunt this turn? Right, that's something you'll ask a lot more. And it'll create this like, and it's all about this board tension now, which is great. I think that is a very important test for the arena, and there's not many bailouts anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like you really need to, not saying that things are like a lot more punishing now because it swings both ways, right? It's like it's more punishing, but also less punishing in certain ways. But you have to do this risk assessment like every single
You
turn,
have an
and you have to
extra
think
turn to
about it a lot
respond,
more.
and that means you have
Yeah,
extra
yeah,
stuff to
yeah.
think about. If your opponent flame strikes you, you're done, right? Like there's not a lot of thinking after a flame strike. But if your opponent like plays two giant things instead of flame striking, well, now you have a turn to react to that, and then you have more stuff to think about.
Yeah,
So one thing to note though is that despite like you may think that with the spell offering bonus going away, the spell and weapons offering bonus initiative would be heavily down. Like the spell and offering bonus, I mean, not going away. It dropped by 50%. Compared to where it was beforehand. Like I thought there was going to be a lot less initiative, and that hasn't really been the case. I mean, there's probably like 15%, maybe 20% less initiative. I thought it was going to go down 50% because spells and weapons went down 50%, but it turns out there's a lot of initiative in neutral now, right? That's what the past 2 years have just been stacking into the arena. A lot of neutral cards rush. A lot of neutral cards deal damage, and in Boomsday itself, a lot of neutral cards either rush or deal damage by itself. So the actual amount of initiative in the arena hasn't gone down by too much. It's gone down by a little bit, but you can still like expect your opponent to be able to like remove a very important piece of your board, kind of like at their whim, especially if you don't taunt up as well as you used to. But what did go down, as Merps was saying before, are the board clears, right? Because you can't replace
yeah,
board
yeah.
clears with neutral cards except for Primordial Drake, which should not be a card.
That's the thing, right? I mean, there's a huge difference between like so when we talk about initiative, there is such a like Steel Rager is
Oh
initiative.
yeah,
It's
it's
even like
good
pretty decent
initiative.
initiative, right? It's good initiative. But then there's initiative like Psychic Scream, which is
Hmm.
don't it doesn't matter what mistakes you've made before then, and maybe you've made a mistake every single turn, which has gotten you into really like a ton of trouble, but then you just Psychic Scream and it wipes everything away,
Yeah,
right? Not there's like Blizzard hasn't been printing those kind of cards or like a meteor kind of card. It's like, okay, you made
there's
some mistakes,
there's one of
have a
those
meteor.
cards in the entirety of Boomsday. It's a Paladin. It's the one that
Shrink
sets
ray.
everything at shrink rate, sets everything
Yeah,
to
yeah.
1/1. So it's even a soft version of that, but that's the only mistake wiper you get in this entire set. So it's been kind of nice to play. Um, so one more meta point, and then I think I'm done with the meta points. Like usually I have a whole ton of meta points, but the meta is just so different than what it was before 12.0. I don't even know where to begin. Just like go in and play, especially if you're more like either a more board centric player or a player who was fed up with the swings and the RNG and like Ungoro. Um, this is way better. But well, one other thing that I think we should point out, because there's kind of a small uproar over it, and I would be hugely surprised if Blizzard doesn't quote unquote fix this when they do the patch. You don't see Ungoro cards. I mean, not Ungoro. You don't see Boomsday cards. They like I've been doing runs, and I don't know what my average is, but I think half of my runs have had 3 or fewer Boomsday cards in my entire like deck.
Yeah, I mean, this is not unexpected though, right? Like we
No,
knew
yeah.
there wouldn't be an offering bonus. So like you're saying this as though it was almost a surprise. Like
Well,
are you
the
just saying like it
the
feels okay,
feeling was
okay.
surprising. Technically,
Right,
like we have a
right.
tier list, we know all the offering odds, everything's computed, it's all fine. When it comes to that kind of stuff. But feeling wise, I didn't quite fully internalize that I just would not be really seeing Boomsday cards except here or there. This is like as bad as Witchwood. Witchwood was bad because it was a lot of over bucketed cards. Boomsday doesn't have a lot of over bucketed cards, but the overall card quality of the neutrals is once again not terribly high. Better than Witchwood, but not terribly high. And the class cards, some of them are good, some of them are bad, but it all got diluted a bit more, and there's less like class bonuses anyway, so there's more emphasis on neutrals. So all this just combines to make you like not worth it for you to take that many Boomsday cards. You're not offered that many.
Yeah, a lot of people have complained about this. I know that some streamers are already sort of like, ah, like this I wanted something exciting and new, right? Like, and I'm already just sort of tired of it. So once again, I don't know if Wizard will do anything about it, because it's also weird if they, a week from now, be like, "Hey, we've increased this." Like, play, like sort of the momentum is already gone, right? Like people have played with the new cards. Maybe people will
Oh,
welcome
I
that as
feel the
well.
opposite. I think it's great for them not to do it in the beginning because they're gonna miss bucket a whole crap ton of cards like they normally do, and then when they bucket them correctly, there's way less of a chance of them totally screwing up arena for a week and a half, right? And then you get like I don't know, a modest bonus. We don't like you don't want plus 100% like they used to do. You want something like plus 50%, right? Like maybe even lower than that, maybe even like plus 33%, just to get a little more Boomsday feel into it. Not sure if it's worth it for them to do it, but I don't see why not. I can't like let's put it this way. I find people who care and people who don't care, but I don't think there's a single person out there who's like, yeah, I like it better with fewer Boomsday cards. Like if you increase Boomsday cards by like 50%, I would like Arena less. I don't think there's a single person out there who feels that way. So it's just pure benefit for Blizzard to do something like
Yeah, that's true. I don't see any downside to it, right? I think everyone would like to see more of it. I don't know. I don't know if they'll do it at this point, but yeah, it is a pure positive. I agree.
Yeah, and especially when they're doing it with updated stats, right? Which means that they're going to rebucket a bunch of things, as we'll go over some of the cards that they need to rebucket. Is there anything else you wanted to go over before we talk about our lists again?
No, let's just talk about the list. A lot of the cards that we talked about during last week's 8 hour long Lightforge. These will be a lot of the cards that we highlighted at the very beginning.
Yeah. All right. So the first card, which was the first card we talked about and the most important card in the Boomsday meta, as we identified pretty much when it was revealed, even before we saw the other cards, as we've told Blizzard about, as many people agree with us, like people who did not agree with us about it, like basically changed their minds as soon as they played with the card, or seen it played against them. It's Giggling Inventor, 5 mana, 2/1, summon 2 Annoyaltrons, which are 1/2 taunt mechs, both with Divine Shield. It's silly. It's a silly card. HS replay shows ridiculously high win rates. It's in the third bucket right now. It is definitely going to be moved up a bucket. One of the things that we covered very clearly with this card is not just that it's basically the best card in the entire like neutral category that Blizzard's ever printed, which is bad enough. The fact that it shuts down an entire archetype is also pretty bad. But more than all of that, it's impossible to misplay this card. You can play it
Yeah.
when you're aggressive. You can play it when you're behind. Like it works for everything because it's just kind of I get my initiative back now kind of card if you're behind, and I protect my face. And if you're ahead, it's like, oh, now I can feel free to attack, and you won't get good trades on me. So that's why the HS replay stats are backing this up really hard. It is like a super premium neutral card, and I don't think Blizzard can ignore this. I think Blizzard will move it up an entire bucket into where like Stonehill Defender currently is. Maybe even higher. I would like to see it go even higher than that. The way we have this card rated, it should be right next to Primordial Drake. I don't know if they're going to get there in one go, but they got to move it at least halfway there.
Yeah, and we can talk about a little how, or like why people didn't think it was that good, right? I think it's this is one of the mistakes that I think people tend to make, where if you sort of put a card next to another card that's really good, and another one that people were looking at in the neutral category especially was Primordial Drake, and then immediately people sort of use this subconscious thought. It's like, well, Primordial Drake is better
Way
than
better.
Giggling Inventor. And it's sort of like, well, and they sort of like don't look at like, as strongly the fact that one costs 5 mana and one costs 8 mana. It's like, is Primordial Drake
Uh,
better as a card than Giggling Inventor? It's like, yes, it definitely is. Like, if you are
that's
at
why it comes out
10,
3 turns later.
right. It's like, if you're at 10 mana, it's like, would you rather have Primordial Drake or Giggling Inventor? Actually, sometimes Giggling Inventor too, depending on where you're at. But like, a lot of the times it's Primordial Drake.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one thing that I think people sort of like, discount. And it's also why like some people discount something like a gastropod,
Yeah.
right? They look at it and they're just like, it's like, yeah, it's okay. It's like, what do I kill? Like
It's
a
just
3-drop,
it's just
maybe
a
a 4-drop,
like a
and then
1 million infinite attack minion with 2 health and taunt for 2 mana. That's all.
right. And then like I hear the responses as well. They're like, I don't kill a 3-drop. It's like maybe a 4-drop. I'm like, okay, so we agree on this. It's like, so we agree. It's like your 2-drop will kill a 3-drop or maybe a 4-drop,
And you
that's
don't
like
think it's an insane card. Like,
right.
we're gonna
Right.
follow this up with, you're so annoyed by the fact that it deals 2 less face damage to the opponent that you don't think it's a super premium card.
Right. So just remember, it's all relative. Like Giggly Inventor, for what it does at 5 mana, is really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's the same thing for like, for example, Glacial Shard for 1 mana does so much, right?
Right.
It's like that it does so much for 1 mana. And then that's sort of like what you need to evaluate it at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was the next card that we identified as being really underbucketed?
Oh, Mechanical Whelp. Mechanical Whelp, if you guys don't remember, is a 6 mana 2/2 mech with Death Rattle. Summon a 7/7 mech. And it's just really good because of the amount of stats that you get, right? So previously we were saying Mechanical Whelp is in the 6 bucket, which is just drastically low. I think our calculated score would have it in like the 2nd bucket,
Yeah.
right? It would have it in the 2nd bucket, and we're just saying like this is also something that people tend to they tend to overemphasize tempo. Like, we love tempo. I think if you listen, you know that we love tempo, but there is such a thing as too much tempo. And then that was it's the same thing that causes people to initially before Silver Sword came out and people saw how powerful it was. That was the main reason that people hated on Silver Sword, right? They were just like, wait. Sometimes you'll be paying 8 mana to deal 3 damage and maybe only get a +1/+1. And if you're behind, you're dead. And that is the exact same argument people can make about Mechanical Whelp. It's like, wait, sometimes you just need more stats for that. And all you're doing is paying 6 mana for a 2/2, which is true. But the amount of stats that you get on average is just so overwhelming. Yeah. It's just so good.
And it's also one of those things where you do want to see who's playing it. Like, this is one of those cards. It's not like Giggling Inventor, right? I highlighted Giggling Inventor in the beginning to say, like, you can't misplay this card. It is not possible to misplay this card. So Blizzard will move it up, right? Now we're at Mechanical Whelp, and it's the exact opposite picture. We're going to talk about another card that's kind of the opposite picture, sort of. This is a card that, like, frankly, you can misplay, right? Sometimes you can't play this on curve. You probably usually don't play it on curve.
Definitely.
Yeah, it depends on what your board state is. You play it in different times. It gets different utility. You have to know what's going on with this game to get the most out of this card. So its win rate on HS Replay is fine, like, for its bucket, right? It's hovering at like 54%, not like great and not bad. So if Blizzard has this similar stats, and HS Replay has better players than Blizzard's average because they have to care enough to install like a tracker onto to play the game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this card doesn't move any buckets and it just remains one of these like bonuses for good players, right, to take.
Yeah, so I will say I had a Mechanical Whelp in my rogue run, and it was great because with my rogue, I did very well with the deck, and lots of times I would be ahead on turn 6, turn 7, or turn 8. And when you're ahead, especially by a lot, you have a lot of stuff on the board, but your opponent has more cards in hand than you have in hand. what you don't want to do is overextend and then, maybe you make the read that they don't have the AoE, but they could always top deck something, right? And then you're always in this uncomfortable spot where you're like, I don't really want to drop anything more because it just makes me lose harder if they top deck that AoE. But you should still play it. But at the same time, it's sort of like you don't want to play it, but you definitely can't play nothing because then you definitely give your opponent a chance to come back. And Mechanical Whelp is so good in that situation
Mhm.
where if you're winning, you just drop the
It's
Mechanical
literally
Whelp.
the best card in the game in that situation.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like,
And
it's
so what I
better than
would
an egg because it does
Mhm.
something even before you do it. You get to spend more mana on it, and if they break your egg, you get a bigger thing than an egg would give you.
Right. So I would have like a very overwhelming board, and then I would drop the Whelp and say, even if you get the AoE now, which you didn't have before, but even if you get it now, you're still screwed because I'm going to have a 7/7 on the next turn. So it locks up the game in a very comfortable way. It was something in which I remember you gave me the score for Whelp like a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago. I was like, I see it. I'm still a little bit like about it. But at the end of the day, I was like, okay, yeah, I see it. We're going with it. And after playing with it, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see how this is good.
Like,
And especially how this is good for good
yeah,
players.
like you see its role, right? Like what it's
Yes.
supposed to do, and when you use it correctly in those situations, it does whatever. And it's a bit more situational than you'd like, but the payoff is so huge. Like even without the death rattle triggering, the payoff is so huge. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I want to highlight. I just take this point. This is another card that we mentioned as being under bucketed and would probably move up, but it's not like too under bucketed. It's a micro tech controller. It's a 119 on our tier list, and in the 6 bucket, the average is probably like for Blizzard is probably like I don't know, maybe like 100 or something. So it should definitely move up a couple buckets. But it's not like a super premium card or anything. And the Microtech controller, as we said, is the 3 mana 2/1 that generates 2/1/1s like Battlecry. So it's like a Murloc Tidehunter, but 3 mana with an extra 1/1. And we were talking about in the last Lightforge about how sneaky this extra 1/1 is and how much better it makes the card compared to Murloc Tidehunter. I don't know if we did a terribly good job of explaining it because Murloc Tidehunter, I think, is in the same bucket as this guy is right now, and maybe what Blizzard was using to say like, oh, this isn't any better than that. But between having the bodies be mechs and the fact that it fits with the curve so much better than Murloc Tidehunter, and it doesn't get pinged away as easily because it's at 3 mana, and all these other stuff that the algorithm's figuring out. It's made this card like 20 points better than Murloc Tidehunter. And if you look at HS replay, because again, this is not a card you screw up. Doesn't matter how good you are, you don't screw up playing this card. It's 56.5%, which is kind of insane for that bucket. So this is a card that will move up, definitely. Whereas Mechanical Whelp, despite being better, like both are good cards, but Mechanical Whelp is better than Microtech Controller, I'm pretty confident. I'm not sure Mechanical Whelp will move up. Because Mechanical Whelp is better for better players than worse players, and Blizzard uses average player stats, and it really just like it takes some getting used to.
Yeah, I agree. I also had double micro tech controllers
Mhm.
in my Rogue
Oh,
run,
especially with
and
Rogue. Oh,
yeah,
especially with
it
Rogue.
did so much work. And what would happen is, so my Rogue deck, I obviously had, I don't think I had any twos, right? Maybe I had a single two drop, but I would play hopefully something on one, and then I would dagger, and then I would play Microtech controller, and it was
Mhm.
just so much tempo for me already, right? It was like so much tempo for me, and mostly because my dagger with all those little like things on board, my dagger was so good because it would always be the damage necessary to finish something off,
Right.
right? And at the same time, like I would have gotten tempo out of every single turn. Like I'd be able to put out one dagger on two is really good, and then I'd put out Microtech controller, and by that time, the 4 attack that it provides split up
Yeah.
is perfect for what I
Because
need.
it's not
Yeah.
vulnerable to your like 3/2 drop, right? That kills your
Mhm.
injured Blade Master or like Dragon Slayer style 4/3. So it like if you look at our tier list, we literally rate it in Rogue. And remember, it's Rogue. They care about their face and protecting it a lot. In Rogue, it's rated the same as Tar Creeper and like 1 point behind Hildnir Frostrider, which Blizzard has in like, I don't know, the second bucket or something really high. Because
yeah, and I kind of agree. Like I saw the power of it, just potentially playing one and then daggering and playing Microtech controller. I'm like, yeah, I don't see how they deal with this.
yeah.
It's
Okay,
just so
Hildnir
annoying.
is in third bucket now. It used to be in the second bucket. They moved it
Mhm.
down. But yeah, so this is like this is where Microtech controller is going to end up. It's going to end up wherever Hildnir is, or at least within 1 bucket of Hildnir.
Pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what other neutral cards did we talk about as being good?
We talked about Omega Defender.
Okay. Omega Defender seems, good.
It is what it
Yeah.
is.
Like we didn't think it was like the best card.
No. That was mostly us just saying like, hey, look, these Omega cards, they are
All
under bucketed.
underbucketed, yeah.
Yeah.
Its win rate is 57.7%. Very large win rate. And gonna move up. Definitely gonna move
and
up.
then we have Skaterbot.
Skaterbot. Okay, so here's the first miss of our rating system. So one thing about our rating system is we don't pull any punches. If we think it's high, it's gonna be really high. There's like zero hedging. The algorithm's like, we're doing this. It's not like, oh, but I also have like a 15% chance of being wrong or a 5% of a chance of being wrong on this one, or depending on how complicated it is, right? So Skaterbot's a new mechanic. It's the same mechanic as Rocket Boots, which is to give something rush. It is not something that the algorithm dealt with before, and we caught a bug in it. So its score will be going down. I want to say like around 20 points. I can't math it out of my head. It's very complicated, but it is. I think it should still be under bucketed for the 5th bucket, but definitely not
so.
where we have it scored. And yeah, it's also obviously a card that swings very heavily. Depends on what mechs you end up having in your deck, right? Like if you have no mechs, terrible card. If you have a bunch of like replicating menaces, it's a great card. Like it very much depends on the deck you put it in. So I would not be surprised if this card goes down instead of up, actually, for Blizzard, because it's also one of the like hardest to use cards in the neutral category in this set. You have to know, like, the hard part is not like, oh, I put it on a minion that's a mech and then it rushes, right? The hard part is knowing when you just play it for a 1-mana ping one and screw its value.
One cost minions are really hard for average players because you really need to get the value out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get value out of one cost cards, because their effect can never be that big, but what is really big is the impact it makes based on the situation, right? So the effect of 1 mana cards are usually like fairly small, but if you use it in the right situation, it could be huge, right? And that's the thing. If you take away a lot of the of the cards impact, and put it into the situation, then that's not going to be good for the average player. So if you look at a card like Giggly Inventor, in which I would say 90% of its value just comes from the card itself, and 10% of the situation, 10% of the value comes from the situation that you play it in, versus for a lot of 1 mana cards, it's like, it's a huge sliding scale, and you can get like really good value for 1 mana if you play in the correct situation. But if you play in other situations, like, it's pretty worthless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And 1 mana cards by themselves, because of their cost, are going to be low impact usually.
Yep. So stay tuned on those. I think all this should be, like, fingers crossed, I think it should all be fixed by Sunday.
Okay,
And
cool.
there will hopefully be a tier list update for that. But let's move on. There's one more what I would say a blatant miscalculation that we'll get to.
Oh, okay.
But I think that was the last neutral card. The other two neutral cards I kind of want to talk about just like briefly. One is Arcane Dynamo. We have that at a 124. It is notable for being the #1 bucket card for Blizzard, and it's not. I don't know really. I think Blizzard was just being conservative there because it was not that good. But it's okay. Like it should probably move down a bucket or two, but it's not terrible. Its win
I think
rate
it's
seems
fine.
okay.
The win rate is okay, and also people, I've used it, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this gets good use. People
Well,
find a lot of AOE, people find a lot of removal and everything.
that's the
And
thing though, right? Like I think better players are better at it because it's literally like you have to know when to play it to discover. You have to turn plan because you can't play the card the same turn, and you have to know which class to take it for what you can get, right? Like
that's fair.
yeah, like it's a veteran card. It's not even something that like when I'm drafting, I have to like sit down and like go look at stuff and like spend like 10 minutes to figure this card out whenever I see it because I haven't internalized it for each class yet. And what percentage of people Blizzard players are going to be doing that in their decks, right?
That is very true. Very, very true.
So
You know what I can do? I can send you because you assigned this to me. I made like a little notepad kind of cheat sheet for Arcane Dynamo.
oh, nice. Yes.
Yeah,
Send that
yeah,
over.
yeah, yeah.
Because it
So
does
it
take a
has like
lot of time to figure that out on the spot.
right, it has specific, and it doesn't have like every single card that you can find, but
Mm-hmm.
it just has the
The
important
important
one.
ones, yeah.
Right, because if it has one that like you will never pick, then you'll never pick it,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the Arcane Dynamo, by the way, the 6 mana 3/4 Battlecry discover a spell that costs 5 mana or more. So the other card that I wanted to talk about just a little is Missile Launcher. Yeah, we have it rated at a 123, which means it's okay in the second bucket where Blizzard puts it. It would probably also be okay in the third bucket. What do you think about that card? What are your experiences with it?
It hasn't been that great.
Okay, good,
I've
good.
seen, yeah, I've seen other players use it, right? And so I'll say this: the fact that it can be
Okay,
an
let's talk. Let me
overcosted,
just say what the card is for first. I
of
forgot.
course,
It's
yeah,
a 6 mana 4/4 magnetic neutral card. Deal 1 damage to all other characters at the end of your turn, like every.
right. Okay, so look, sometimes all like you really do just want an overcosted Blessing of Kings, right, for your mech minion. So that part is good. The 1 damage to everything, but at the end of the turn definitely hurts
Yeah.
because like if you for an effect like this, like would you like it at the beginning of the turn or end of the turn? Definitely beginning, right? Like so you can just get stuff out of the way and then you can like fight through taunts that way, you know? And for a lot of people, so I've seen like Hafu and Ratsma stream with it, and like in one of Ratsma's run, I saw especially it's just like it's just not enough, right? Like if you're sort of even on the board or if you're a little bit behind and it just doesn't do enough, you're like, man, I'm paying 6 mana for a 4/4, and yes, it deals 1 damage like everything else, but it just makes no negligible
Yeah.
difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's one of those cards in which I think it's a little bit over bucketed,
Yeah.
like you said, it's a little bit overcosted. Do I think it has to be moved? No, not
I
exactly.
think it's going to be moved down because if we're having trouble with this card, what do you think the average player is doing with it? Like HS Replay has it, pretty low win rate.
Yeah,
Like I think
yeah.
Blizzard's gonna look at it and move it down a bucket,
Right.
which
It's
is
just
good
one of
because
those.
it's one of those cards. I think it's fine if you move it down one bucket.
I definitely think so. It just depends on where they draw the line, right? Because there's going to be cars that are way more over slash under bucketed
Mm-hmm.
than Missile Launcher. I think Missile Launcher will be, if they broaden it a little bit, like past the obvious offenders, then yes, I think it will be swept into there. But I could see a universe in which it's not swept in,
Mm-hmm.
just because there's going to be stuff that's like way more wrongly bucketed.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to point it out though. These are both cards that we basically told you don't draft it unless you have the right deck for it, and that still holds.
Mhm.
Now that we've played with it, we're kind of like, yeah, it's pretty much what it is. Arcane Dynamo score is not going to move. Missile Launcher score is going to move down a little bit as we get a little more precise with its ability, but not by like much. Like I don't anticipate it going down in the next update. So yeah, let's talk about. You want to talk about the neutral cards that we said never take?
Yeah, sure. And I think we can go through this fairly quickly. First, there was Electro right, which is a 3 mana, 3/3 minion, and battle cry. If you are holding a spell in your hand that is 5 or more, 5 or more mana, gain +1/+1.
Okay.
Ooh.
Have you seen this played against you?
Yes, I have seen it
So
played against
often,
me.
right?
Yes,
I've seen
a
it
fairly
everywhere.
good amount.
I'm like,
yes.
who the hell is taking this freaking card? Apparently, a ton of people. And how many times has it been played on turn 3 as a 4/4?
Okay, then no,
0,
never,
right?
Never.
0
never,
here too.
never.
Most of the time, and I mean like, 3 out of 4 times. I may be seeing this card 8 times. So maybe like 6 out of 8 times, it was a 3/3 late in the game. And then like twice, it was a 4/4 on turn 7 or after for 3 mana.
Yeah, I've seen it as a 4/4 once, but right, it was like on turn 8 or something.
Yeah, like this card's playing out exactly like we thought. It's a terrible card. Don't take it. It'll be moved down.
Right, and once again, it's just because it's in the 4th bucket.
Mhm.
Like there are so many decent cards in the 4th bucket that you shouldn't take what is 90% of the time going to be a 3 mana 3/3.
I want to point out one more thing though. Its win rate is 54%, which means generally for neutral cards in HS Replay, that means it's bucketed correctly for HS Replay players.
Decent.
Which means Blizzard's not moving this card.
Oh boy.
And you know why it's good for players who are like less good? It's because if they do get it out on turn 3, which again, I'm still confused by how the win rate is so high because the percentage of that I've seen it trigger is so low. But I guess I have a small sample. And it actually does trigger the like 15% chance or whatever it is. You can obviously stack your deck, right, depending on where you're actually picking this card,
right?
With more potential for it to happen, and if it happens, it's really good, right?
Right. Average players will rely more on these swings and benefit more from these swings. That's
not
kind
even
of
that big of a swing. I don't know.
It is still a swing, and with all the 3/4s now,
yeah, that's
right?
true.
Like
there's a
you
lot
see
of
tons of 3/4s. So if you get the right, so it's sort of like, and this is why we say don't take it because there's so many 3/4s in the meta right now. If it's a 3/3, oh man, that's really bad for you. Yeah. But if it's a 4/4, ooh, and that's what like 3-win players need. Right?
I'm still surprised by the win rate. I'm still like very surprised by the win rate. Like I can see it, but I still think it should be lower than. I mean, this is the middle bucket here, right? This is where like Direwolf Alpha lives, where Rotten Apple.
Yeah.
Like these are like real cards. I don't know.
Anyways, our advice continues to be: do not take this. Definitely take other cards. So that's Electro, right? The other card, and this was the card that we made a very hard stand on, got a lot of pushback. This was when we released our Boomsday article. I posted it. This was the card that sparked so much debate, and a lot of people were, disgusted at our rating of this, and absolutely convinced, like they were gonna like bet their firstborn child that like we were gonna be wrong.
Not that just that we were wrong, but that it's not like over bucketed, it's actually severely under bucketed. So we're not talking like, oh, we think it's over bucketed, they think it's fine. We think it's really over bucketed. They think this should be in like the second, third bucket.
Anyways, enough skirting around it. It is Emp Operative that we're talking about. And if you guys are curious, once again, this is a 5 mana 3/3 minion. That's right, 5 mana for a whole 3/3. Battle cry, destroy a mech. So if there's a mech out there, you destroy it. If there's not a mech out there, well, you're either playing a 5 mana 3/3 or you keep on holding it.
I have never seen it destroy a mech that is more than 6 stats total.
Yeah, it's and right now I track how long, like, we have deck
Yeah.
tracker, right? So you can see how long like someone has held it for. And I've had someone kill off one of my mechs with so I've only had it go off against me
Well,
once
I've had it go
total, and
off against me a decent number of times, but each time it's like, yeah, I guess if this specific situation played out, you have a card that's roughly worth the fourth bucket.
Mhm.
And then the other, like, half of the time, it's like being held for a really long time or does not go off at all. And I'm like, well, those times, you have a card that's worth close to zero. And so you average the two, and you have a pretty low score here.
Yep. So once again, I think like, just based on my experience, and I've gotten a lot of feedback as well. I think we called this one correctly.
Oh yeah, the
Like
stats back us up.
this,
And by the
the
stats,
stats
I
back it
don't
up.
mean that the HS replay stats say it's a terrible card. It won't because HS replay is
No, it won't.
average win rate's like 4.2 or something. But what you do is you compare a card like this, the win rate, with a card like Big Game Hunter, which is another 5 mana hate card that has the same stats as a 4-2 stat line instead of a 3-3 stat
Mhm.
line. And then you look at what they are. And Big Game Hunter is winning 2% more. 2% is a pretty big deal in HS replay stats. Big Game Hunter is 2% higher than EMP Operative. And Big Game Hunter, which has been around forever and which Blizzard has been bucketing based on their average player like stats and picks and things like that for a very, very long time. And Big Game Hunter is in the 6th bucket. EMP, by the way, is in the 4th bucket. So EMP is performing at a lower bucket than the 6th bucket.
Right. And
So
part of it also comes from the fact that, like, by taking it, you are passing up on average better cards,
yeah.
right? So that would naturally lower the win rate. But yeah, I think this is a very good comparison here. BGH versus EMP Operative, and it's also, you give up something as well. Like, you give up a little bit more like ability to hit on a minion with BGH, but man, when you hit
Mm-hmm.
with a BGH, you hit with it. Like, that is the biggest swing, right? And with EMP Operative, a lot of times you're just hitting like small mechs. In which case, yeah, you're going to see a decent amount of mechs if you go through your games, but the vast majority of them are really small. Like, we have a lot of 1/1 mechs out there. We have a lot of like just tiny, tiny mechs. So you're not gonna, like, your dreams of hitting that bulldozer. It'll happen if you keep on drafting EMP Operative. It'll happen. And it'll happen to you too when you draft Bulldozer,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't make it a good card, right?
All right. Anything else we wanna talk about?
Um, no, I will say one last thing. This is also one of those cards in which, we say this right now, but I don't think we're ever going to change some people's minds,
Yeah.
right? Because like for example, I see it in the chat right now.
Wait,
One
but I don't
comment
understand.
is
Like, at least if you really like EMP, for example, you better really like Big Game Hunter.
that's the thing.
Like, you
Like,
can't hold a consistent position of really liking EMP but not really liking Big Game Hunter. Like, if you think Blizzard's severely under bucketing like Big Game Hunter, then okay, at least you're consistent. You're wrong, but you're consistent. Like, if you're like, oh, Big Game Hunter's fine in the 6th bucket, maybe the 5th bucket, but EMP should be in the 3rd bucket, then you're just wrong and inconsistent. And it's just hard to take people like that seriously.
right, right. But like, so, like, for example, one of the comments I see in the chat is, "But my opponents have done nothing but get max value," and it's
Mm.
one of those biases in which, of course, every time you see it played,
Remember the
it's
Death
gonna
Knight outrages? The same thing.
it's the same thing with Death Knight. It's like people are just like, dude, whenever a Death Knight comes down, like, I lose so often.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we're just like, okay, so, like, people play Death Knights against us, and then we're so ahead that our win rate against Death Knight is so, like, ridiculously high still. And also, I'm just like, man, I don't even know how many times in which they've had
Yeah,
a Death Knight in their hand, but they were just like, no, I can't
can't play
play
it.
this. I can only play the giant
Yeah,
mastodon,
because I need to
right?
live, because this isn't gonna keep me alive.
Right. So it's one of those cards in which people for some people, we're never going to change their minds. You can
Mhm.
present them the numbers and everything, but they'll say, "No, I've seen this get more value. You can't tell me otherwise."
We're not telling you
Like,
otherwise. They are getting
right.
that much value when you see it. It's what you don't see that matters.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you see it, especially for your opponents. And man, those are the times when it feels the worst,
Mhm.
right? When your opponent plays it on your giant mech and you lose, you remember that because you get
I
mad,
mean, these are
and
hate
rightfully
cards.
so.
They're
Because hate
designed
cards
to make
suck.
you like
Yeah,
tilt, right?
hate cards suck. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm never happy when someone plays Dragon Slayer and it hits on
Mhm.
me, right? I'm never happy when Glockcrawler eats like one of my pirates, even if it's just like a Bloodsail Raider, right? So with a card like this, you really just you have to also if you're internalizing the time that it hits your big minion, you also have to, for the sake of fairness, internalize all the times in which it was a dead card in your opponent's hand.
Mhm.
And you can't do that as a human being.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like,
hard.
because you just don't know. It's hard. So you just have to go by the numbers here. Anyways,
Okay.
that's sort of my thing.
Let's move
Hopefully, I
on.
convince like two of you people. Maybe not. Hopefully.
Let's move on. And also, the less you use cards like these in the arena, the better you make the game for everybody. So do it as community service too. Just don't take EMP. And if we all don't take a card, as we've realized from Blizzard's bucketing system, they'll just lower the card like into lower buckets. Anyway, um, let's look at class cards. I'm gonna start off. We started off our neutral cards with the Yes, we were very right about pretty much all the neutral cards except one. We for the class cards, I feel very similarly, but just going off the skater bot thing, the rocket boots for warrior, which I can't even find it right now. Okay, so that's a fourth bucket for Blizzard, 2 mana, give a minion rush, and draw a card. That's gonna go down as well. I'm gonna check what its win rates are. Rocket Boot's win rate's fine. It's 53.4%. It may move down a bucket. It may hold its position. But either way, we had it rated really, really high because of the bug, or not really a bug. It was just we did not do give rush correctly. And so it'll come down to earth to more normal-ish values. It'll probably end up, I want to say, somewhere like a 130. So still very high. Like, I still think these are the kinds of cards in which we're always going to rate them higher than how Blizzard would rate them, and that's fine. But it is not a 173. So you should still take it, but don't take it as if it were like a super super premium card. And the other class card that, and this one is because of a bug, was Glowstone Technician, which we have already hotfixed in our tier list, and we'll get you the actual accurate number on Sunday, but it'll be somewhere around this number. I think we had it at a 170 or something. It's now a 130. So it's still at the very top of its
You should
bucket.
still take
You should
it.
still take
So
it. None of the recommendations
yeah.
are different, except the difference is how many buckets we will move it up. Like, if Glowstone Technician's in a 130, we probably only move it up like 3 buckets instead of like 5. Like, that's the difference, right? So when I say we're wrong, I don't mean we're wrong in anything we've told you to do or draft. I mean we're wrong in that you're gonna see the number drop back down to earth. So if you were looking at like Glowstone Technician, you're like, there's no way it's a 170. Well, you were right. It's not a 170. It's like a 130, maybe even a 120.
It's like a 130, but
We'll see what the
still.
exact number comes down to.
Right. So right now it is in the 6 bucket.
And Glowstone Technician is the 6 mana, 3/4, give all minions in your hand +2/+2 paladin.
Right. So like practically this changes nothing. You shouldn't view Glowstone Tech any differently,
or Rocket Boots for that matter.
Or Rocket Boots for that matter, because it's all about what it's being offered against, right? So, previously if you had Glowstone Tech versus Primordial Drake, then you'd be like, oh, okay, well, let's think about this for a sec. But that's never gonna happen. So with Glowstone Tech, you're going to be it's going up against cards that are vastly inferior usually. and it doesn't really matter if it's a 170 or a 130. But for the
And
sake of
regardless,
accuracy,
for rocket boots, at least with the new score, it probably shouldn't be moved up any buckets. Or it should be moved up like one bucket if you're a really good player, and for Blizzard, it may even be moved down a bucket because they're using average player. For a Glowstone, though, it'll still be moved up. It should still be moved. I don't know if it will be because it's also a more difficult card to play, but we still think it should be moved.
yeah, definitely.
Okay, so those are the two that you'll see like significant score adjustment. Any other? Oh, we need to talk about Blight Nozzle Crawler. That's
Yeah.
that's the one of the other cards that we highlighted as having a very large score discrepancy between where we want it and where Blizzard put it. Blizzard put it in the third bucket. We want it in the first.
Yeah, so I had 2 Blight Nozzles in my Rogue run this week. I think it's just as good as advertised. It was amazing. Just puts the opponents in a really, really tough position, right? Once again, this is a card in which it has a huge discrepancy where if your opponent is on the board and they have like a decent advantage, right?
Mm-hmm.
White Nozzle can be terrible. It can be beyond terrible, right? It could just be a 2/4 with the death rattle of a 1/1. But if you're ahead on the board, man, it boxes your opponents into such a difficult
What is
spot,
Blight
right?
Nozzle, Merps?
Blight Nozzle, good question, is a 4-mana 2/4 mech with Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 rush poisonous minion. So you can see how it's very powerful when you have control of the board, and when you don't have control of the board, and they have like the 4/4 minion with like small minions, it's really bad, right? Like really, really bad for 4 mana. And because I was able to gain control of the board, I was able to put this out there, and it immediately just puts the opponents in a seriously tough spot. If they play small, I had as a rogue, I already had a board lead, and I had initiative from my dagger and from spells in my hand to deal with that. And if they play anything big, Blight Nozzle takes care of it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a problem solver, and I think it's well worthy of like the 150-ish score that we have.
So I think here's the interesting part about Blight Nozzle. One, its win rate is actually 60%, which is
Mhm.
ridiculous. So it's a complicated card. Good players are going to be better with it, but it's just overall a stupidly powerful card for most people. And the other thing that I want to highlight is you got to compare it to something like a wasp, right? Like if you're thinking about something that kills big things, and we have wasp rated significantly lower than Blight Nozzle, and I think that's the confusing part to people, where they're like, this is kind of like you do get the same thing as a wasp gets you, but you're like a little less in control of it. It gets delayed more. It costs 1 extra mana. Like, where's the gain, right? Like, where's the gain that makes it actually better than a wasp, not worse? Um, and the gains in the 2/4 body, because the
Yeah.
2/4 body is not just there to prevent you from killing something, right? It's not there to prevent you from playing a 4 mana like skittering whatever, like that hunter rush card that poisons and kills something. Like that's not what it's there for. The 2/4 body does work, especially if you're on like you're ahead on the board. The 2/4 body can keep hitting face. It can keep clearing small minions. Your opponent doesn't want to get rid of it unless it has like the board or something to kill your 1/1 guy. Like it causes all sorts of problems and it makes the board very messy. Um, and that is where the extra value comes from. Like it's in it, I know a lot of people think of it as like a death rattle wasp, that for some reason is 1 mana higher, but really the 2/4 body does a lot of work. Like just play with it, you'll see what we mean. Don't try to just kill off the 2/4 body for no reason, like just to get your like rush minion out. Like use the body. That's where a lot of the score is in.
Yep. So once again, with a card like this, it's easy to make the same mistake. And I saw this when we were doing the Lightforge a week ago, and I see this comment, for example, in just being said right now as well. It's like, I think this car is overrated. It's really bad when you're behind. For the purposes of like sort of, because when we do this, we also want you guys to evaluate these cards, right? It's like when you make plays, you should critically think about your plays. When you think about cards, and it's part of getting better at the arena, right? Getting better at Hearthstone, you should understand sort of like, okay, well, if I like by being better at these analyses, you increase your understanding of the card. And one thing that you don't want to do is just fall into these sort of like these like habits, right? That will always cloud your judgment of a card. And I see like I would say 95% of Hearthstone players do this. They say, this card isn't that good because it's bad when you're behind. But then just take a second and think about how many cards are actually good when you're behind. Those are the super duper premium cards, right? Like the beyond sort of like, okay, we have like
Primordial
it's a reason
Drake.
why Primordial Drake is Primordial Drake. It's a reason why Psychic Scream is Psychic Scream. It's a reason why Flame Strike is so high, right? And you have a lot of cards that are really good, Silver Sword, but if you're behind and you're getting hit in the face and you don't have a board, so like if you're in that situation, how bad is Silver Sword? It's terrible,
Unplayable.
right? It's trash tier. It's unplayably bad, and yet it still is arguably the best card in Paladin because like there are those times in which you're not that far behind,
which is most of the time. The
which is
vast
most of the
majority
time.
So
and you can capitalize on the effect.
It's the same thing, right? Like, why is EMP good? Oh, because I can kill this whatever thing. How often will it happen? I don't know, like 15, 20% of my games it'll kill something really nice. Well, how often are you really behind that you can't play these cards? I don't know, maybe 15, 20% of my games. But in these games, like, this is a worthless card, and so therefore the card is like bad or good or whatever. Like, that's not how odds work. That's not how math works. You guys know that. But you're not thinking about it in that way. And that's the mistake, right?
Right. And it's the constructed sort of like, well, BGH kills this, right? Like way that people thought a long time ago. And it's easy because it's human nature. It's very easy. First of all, it's easy to hate on things, and Adulta would know because I'm the official hater when it comes to these cards.
Okay, Merps, you were really good this expansion. You hated on very few cards.
I'm getting better. Mm-hmm. I'm getting much better, right? But I was the resident hater, and now I'm getting a lot better. Like I only gave you a slight like queasy feeling about mechanical Whelp, and now I'm like, nope, let's go for it. You presented Glowstone Tech, and I should have hated on that more. That was like the most I hated, and but then you were just like, no, we're going with it. I'm like, fine, all right, we're with it. But yeah, like for a lot of these cards, it's just it's so easy to not only hate on it, but to think of the worst case scenario and then use that, and then think that blankets a lot more. Right. And for some of these cards, because it's so easy to think of the worst case scenario, see Silver Sword. And you look at it and you're like, wow, yeah, it is absolutely trash. Like, not only can I not use a weapon in this instance, it only deals 3 damage. It is literally like
3 damage.
Worse than a shield bearer. Yeah. So yeah. But once again, we can't get caught in sort of that, right? And when you're evaluating cards, whether it's for your own personal tier list, or you're just evaluating cards based on where you are in the draft, right? Because where you are, like after the 25th pick, your evaluation of card will be very deck dependent as well. So just remember this at the same time, because this is a skill that should help you out, like in your critical thinking and risk assessment for future arenas.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we're looking at HS replay stats because, I don't know, combined we've done like 6 runs, 7 runs, which is decent for the number of days that have gone by, but it's not like as anywhere near as many as HS replay. But you got to know how to take HS replay stats, right? Like someone in chat pointed out, Giant Wasp and Rogue has the same win rate as Blight Nozzle, though. Well, yeah, Giant Wasp is also like 4 buckets lower, so you're giving up way worse cards than you're giving up to take Blight Nozzle. And Blight Nozzle is a more complicated card than Giant Wasp, but you'll get more value out of it if you can figure out how to use it. So the fact that they have the equal win rate means Blight Nozzle Crawler is a lot better than Giant Wasp. Not that we think Wasp is bad. We think Wasp should be in the like second bucket, like maybe the third bucket at worst, and we think Blight Nozzle should be in the first bucket. Maybe the second half of the first bucket at worst, but like at least up there. Okay. So any other what other cards do we think were really good class wise?
We thought Omega Assembly was really
Okay,
good.
that's still really good. No one's arguing about that.
Cybertech Chip.
Okay, if you look at stats, just as predicted, its win rate is not terribly high. But this is exactly what we said. The win rate's not going to be high. It's still going to be just that good. Keep taking it.
Right. I mean, this is a card that requires you to be on the board, right? Like any sort of setup and then card draw and then decision making. Like you can tell this is a card in which it's hard to set up, and even afterwards, a lot of decisions have to be made for you to actually get the value that you expect out of this card. So
Cybertech, by the way, is the 2 mana, give all your minions Death Rattle, give a random.
Yep. Okay, and we talked about some other cards as well, but I think we've already hit on the major cards.
Cool. All right. Well, that's gonna be our word on this meta. I don't think there's. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more to say, but the reality is that this meta is not going to exist in about a week. So there's not that much to say about it. Go in, have fun, try to get used to this whole 12.0 feel. Blizzard's going to rebucket everything in a week, as they did in Witchwood. I'm sure of it. 2 weeks max, probably a week or a week and a half. And once that happens, you'll be in somewhat of a different meta. But this right here, this is the best meta to learn your fundamentals, because it's all fundamentals right now, and it's pretty soft overall. And there are enough stuff that are misbucketed that if you just listen to Lightforge, you're gonna have an edge on your deck. Period. And yeah, like pick some of the normal classes. Don't go crazy, right? Right now, if you're wondering what classes are doing well, Rogue, as predicted, is doing well. Warlock's doing better than expected. I thought it'll go down a bit, but it's still up there. Right there with Rogue. Druid is number 3 right now by HS replay stats, which means it's probably the best class, maybe besides Rogue, that exists, because Druid's always underrated for some reason. I don't know. I guess it's actually a complicated class. I never think of it as a complicated class, but just throughout the entire history of Hearthstone, we and almost all good arena players have found, like, top arena players have found Druid to be better than their win rate for other players. So we're actually playing a Druid Coop after this, and I'm kind of excited because Druid looks like it's doing very well. So those are the top classes right now, and Hunter, as always, anytime the meta changes, Hunter is actually really good, no matter what the win rates say. Hunter's at the bottom of the win rates, but it's going to be one of your top, like, I would be very surprised if it was not the 4th best class at worst right now, assuming you know what you're doing. Just because
I've also heard,
meta.
yeah, a lot of reports are coming in that aggro works very well.
Yeah.
And if you draft an aggressive hunter, you should do very well. And unfortunately, if you run into a Giggling Inventor, you're dead. But there's not that many Giggling Inventors out there. So you
can
just
offer
have to accept
0.8 Giggling Inventors per
right.
per run. And assuming you take every single one of them, they're going to show up in your opponent's, like, in your game, like maybe in 40% of your games, and then they're going to show up on curve in maybe 20% of your games. So you're fine.
Yeah, you're going to be okay, but you also have to accept, and this is just sort of the aggro mentality, right? Like, you are going to have to accept the fact that there are going to be more unwinnable, like a higher percent of your games are games in which you just get slaughtered. Yep. You just get hard countered, right?
That's the case with aggro and control. The more you stray away from mid-range, the more you have games that just lose.
Yep.
So those are our pick for the top 4 classes. Rogue, Druid, Warlock, Hunter in some order. I'm pretty sure Rogue is number one. So Rogue, and then Warlock, Druid, and Hunter in some order. And the classes to stay away from, as we said before, was Priest. And I'm going to add one more to that list because it is doing terribly. And we have some firsthand experience with how terribly that class does. And it's Paladin. They did something with Paladin when it comes to, I think once they put 12.0 in and all the Paladin's good cards stopped being offered to the Paladin, because they reduced all class cards, not just spells, but to about 50% what they used to be offered. And if you're talking about who has the best class cards, it's always been Paladin. So I guess we should have known, but we did not pick up on this. But you can definitely see it in the arena right now whenever you try to draft a Paladin. It looks terrible. It feels terrible. It performs terribly. There's not much you can do with it, as is usually the case with Paladin and Priest. So those are our picks for the two worst classes. And the other three classes would be that mid-tier. So step 1, Rogue. Step 2, Warlock, Druid, Hunter in some order. Step 3, Mage, Shaman. What other class am I missing? I am missing a class, right? Warrior. There we go. Mage, Shaman, Warrior, and step 4, Paladin and Priest. All right. Well, yeah. You got. Let's do question from the goat.
Sure. Question from the GOAT comes from Twitter this week. We had ChewieHS message us and ask, what are some ways that good players extract value from Blessing of Wisdom? Blessing of Wisdom, if you guys don't know, that's a 1-mana paladin spell, and then you get to draw a card every time that the minion that's been blessed attacks. So right now, Blessing of Wisdom is in the last bucket. And if you listen to this podcast, you know that we believe that Blessing of Wisdom is one of the most ridiculously underbucketed cards in the game. We think it's a really good card, and it is in the lowest bucket right now. But the question is basically like, okay, so obviously bad players or just average players use the card very poorly. And what makes bad players bad with it, and what makes good players good with it?
So one small consideration is bad players have the board list often. It's not as big of a consideration as you might think, because in terms of Blizzard stats, 95% of their games is what we consider bad players playing against other bad players. So someone's going to have the board. And so that's not going to be like a huge consideration, but it does. It lowers the score of the card by like 5-10%, right? But this card is so underbucketed. That's not even close to the only thing that's happening here. The other thing I see people do a lot is they put it on your opponent's minion. That's terrible value. And maybe it works against a bad... Like, I never know, right? Because I almost never put it on my opponent's minion. And whenever they put it on my minion, I know exactly what to do with it. Like, when to actually attack with it and when not to. So I don't know what kind of a problem it is for the stats, but it's generally something that you try not to do. What you really want to find is a safe space. Like, anytime you have a minion and you play a taunt, and then you put this on that minion, and then you attack with it, is any other time in which you have a minion, it's a pretty threatening minion in one or the other, and your opponent has not removed it. You can never read that your opponent doesn't have the initiative to remove a minion. Then you put it on either that minion or another minion with same health or above, and you attack with the other minion, and that's very safe because your opponent just gave you a read that they can't remove stuff, or they really, really, really don't want to remove. Any time that your opponent looks like they're setting up for something, like for example, they basically skip a turn, right? Well, now you have tempo and all this other stuff, and it's a great time to be like, well, now you better get rid of my minion. I know you didn't want to before, but you can't keep doing nothing, so whatever you're trying to play on your turn 7 that you're setting up for, don't do that. Instead, you need to kill this minion or I'm getting 2 cards. What else? What else do you do to extract value from it? Oh, anytime you're really ahead on the board, and you don't need to play more tempo, like it's a good 1-mana anti-tempo card that'll also give you more options even on the same turn to maybe anti-tempo even more. Like, it's a lot of things that's like kind of like edge cases, but if each one of them adds 5% value to a card that's otherwise rated like, let's say, a 90, and there's like 8 of these, well, you're gonna get like a 140 rated card, a 130 rated card at the end of it. So that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. Not a lot more has to be said. But yeah, it's definitely one of those cards in which you look at it and you're like, this isn't, it's not that hard to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not too hard. It doesn't seem that hard to set up. But yeah, it's a card in which you can also just gain massive amounts of value if you are ahead, right? Or if you know how to use it correctly. So the discrepancy between using it well and using it bad, it's not just you know how to use the situations. The net effect that you get from using it well is ridiculous. You can just draw so many cards, and the like unfortunately, most of the time when people use it incorrectly or very suboptimally, you get like very little or nothing out of it.
All right. Well, that's it for the Lightforge. Remember, this is being recorded on Friday. We will see you again next Sunday, not this Sunday, next Sunday, and delve deeper into the Boomsday meta. Until then, this is Adwicta.
This is Merps. Good luck in the arena, guys.